Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Aaron Harawa. I'm Chief of Staff to Congressman Glenn Ivy, and welcome to our town hall here tonight. Congressman Glenn Ivy has been serving Maryland's 4th District in Congress since we came into office back in 2023. It feels like a very long 2 years at this point. But it is an absolute pleasure to continue to serve Maryland's 4th District every day. And the Congressman will be sharing a couple of updates from Congress. And really, it's an opportunity for the Congressman to get to hear directly from his constituents. So we will have a Q&A portion towards the end of the program. I'll lay down some ground rules for the Q&A discussion a little bit later in the evening's program as we get closer to the Q&A discussion. We'll be starting off here with some video remarks from our great Senator Chris Van Hollen, who could not be here with us tonight but wanted to send his remarks to share about the work that he's been doing on behalf of Maryland's 4th District in the United States Senate. So, we will get started. Like I said, we'll start with the video from Senator Chris Van Hollen, and then we'll jump into remarks from Congressman Glenn Ivy from there. Thanks so much.
Hi, I'm Chris Van Hollen, and I'm proud to represent you in the United States Senate. And I want to thank my friend Congressman Glenn Ivy for organizing this town hall and for his leadership in the House of Representatives. I'm sorry I cannot join you in person, but appreciate the chance to share a few words. And my regional director, Roderick Lewis, is there to relay to me concerns and comments from this gathering. We are all engaged in a great battle to protect our democracy, the Constitution, the rule of law, and our country. It is a moment for all patriots to stand up and be counted. We are fighting a lawless president who cares only about serving himself and his cronies at the expense of everybody else. We're fighting the most corrupt bargain in American history. Elon Musk spent $280 million to get Trump elected, and Trump has handed Musk the keys to the federal government, not to make it more efficient, but to rig it to work for people like Elon Musk and powerful special interests. Together with Congressman Ivy, I am fighting their illegal actions, including their illegal firing of federal workers at every juncture, in the courts, in the Congress, and in our communities. That's why on Friday, I offered an amendment in the Senate to shut down the illegal Musk Doge operation. That amendment lost by 4 votes, 48 to 52, with 1 Republican senator joining all Democrats to defund Doge. It's also why I voted hell no against the House Republican continuing resolution. It was a terrible bill that will further fuel the Trump-Musk illegal rampage. And I was extremely disappointed that Democrats did not unite to block its passage in the Senate. No matter what comes next, I want you to know that together with Congressman Ivy and Senator Alsobrooks, I will fight tooth and nail to defend every Marylander from Trump and Musk's law-breaking spree. The Democrats on Team Maryland have been the tip of the spear in the fight against Trump and Musk, and we will redouble our efforts in the weeks to come. To get the latest updates on what I'm doing, please sign up for my newsletter by going to my website at vanhollen.senate.gov. And I'll end in the spirit I began, by thanking all of you for being patriots in this fight. We can prevail, but only if all of us stand up together to bullies.
I want to thank my colleague Roderick for being here on behalf of Senator Van Hollen tonight, and Senator Van Hollen for sending in remarks. And again, I really want to thank the audience here tonight for being here with us. As Senator Van Hollen said, we're all in this together and we're all fighting together. Now I'll turn it over to my boss, the greatest congressman in the United States Congress, Congressman Glenn Ivy.
Don't tell Steny he said that. So, good evening, all. I look out, I see a lot of familiar faces, and I wish I could see us under better circumstances, but I definitely am appreciative of you all coming out today, and wanted to cover a couple of things that actually Chris touched on. First, want to go through the courts issue. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in Congress, and I want to talk about next steps. The courts piece is really the best thing we've got going on, and that's really going to be outstanding. But let's talk about the continuing resolution vote. That's what Chris alluded to about the Friday vote. And that was a big deal. I think at the last town hall meeting we did in Greenbelt, was that about 2 weeks ago, I pointed to Friday as a big day. That was the shutdown day that was going to happen if a continuing resolution wasn't passed. Backing up a little bit from there, though, the Tuesday before that, House Democrats voted almost unanimously against the Republican continuing resolution. And I want to commend Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader, for pulling that together. There were 214 Democrats that were present. 213 voted against it. Only one Democrat peeled off and voted with the Republicans on that bill. And I thought that was important for a couple of reasons. One, we were hoping it would send the right message to the Senate. We wanted to make sure that they understood that we had very strong feelings about what the Trump administration was doing in this bill in particular, and that we really needed them to vote against that bill. And the reason it's so important, we'll talk about what was in the bill in a second, but this is one of those few opportunities where, because we the Democrats don't control the House, the Senate, or the White House, we can get outvoted on all the majority rule votes, but there's every now and then there's votes in the Senate where they need 60 votes. And this was one of them. And so our hope was that we would be able to push back the continuing resolution. I know there was a concern about a shutdown that would come with that, but I thought that it was certainly worth the gamble, especially given the fact that Trump and Elon Musk were moving so quickly to fire federal employees anyway. And my hope was that part of what would go on with that is, as we've had with other government shutdowns, the American public, I know we always talk bad about the government, but once it gets shut down, you know, you don't miss your water till the well runs dry. They start thinking like, well, you know, wait a second, why are my checks late? How come when I call about something I can't get a response? And we got some bigger issues there too with respect to the overall impact of a government shutdown on top of the negative things that Donald Trump's doing. Couple of things. He ran on fixing the economy, quote unquote, even though the economy was the envy of the Western world under the Biden-Harris administration. But look at what he's done since he got there. He put up the tariffs issue, and, you know, every now and then I suppose tariffs can be a good tool, but don't do tariffs on everybody all at once at the same time, and don't put tariffs on your best friends. Canada, you know, he talked about putting tariffs on Canada that were actually bigger than the tariffs he wanted to put on China. And on top of that, the impact on many of our businesses, like the auto industry, where, you know, the cars aren't totally assembled in the United States. We get the parts over in Canada and vice versa. And sometimes the parts go back and forth. The way he would impose these tariffs is you would get multiple tariffs on each of those items every time they go back and forth. So he was talking about reducing prices. Auto prices would go through the ceiling. And so he heard from the CEO of Ford and others who said, wait a second, what are you doing? You're going to increase the cost on cars by thousands of dollars. And people are going to start turning away from American cars and to other imports from other places, like, say, Japan. But that was just one. The Medicaid impact, too, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. But the Medicaid impact, there was a bill before the the continuing resolution that came up 2 weeks earlier, and that was a budget resolution. And the budget resolution is instructions from the overall leadership in the House to individual committees, in this instance about cuts they want to make to particular programs that are under those committees' jurisdiction. That's important because in this particular instance, the Trump administration wants to cut $881 billion, billion with a B, out of Medicaid. Now, Medicaid is one of the best programs we've got going in the United States. Medicaid, there are 80 million Americans who use Medicaid. Many of them are children. Many of them are seniors. Many of them are disabled. Here, just in Maryland, just in my district, The Medicaid cuts would impact 236,750 people. 125,000 of those people are kids, and 12,000 plus are seniors. Now, the other part of that cut would come from Obamacare. Now, you know they've been after Obamacare since, that's why they started calling it Affordable Care Act, because they didn't want Obama to get any credit for it. But it's actually helped to cover millions of people who didn't have coverage beforehand. And so the impact that those cuts that they're trying to impose would make would be to increase the premiums for Obamacare for over 28,000 people in this district, just in my congressional district, by almost $2,000 a year. So we want to make sure we can block those things. And the Medicaid cuts are going to have a terrible impact across the country. And you're already seeing people respond negatively to that. So for example, you've seen some of these town hall meetings in Republican districts where people are mad at the Republicans for what they're doing. Matter of fact, they got so mad that the Republican leadership told them, don't have town hall meetings anymore. Think about that. Don't have we don't want you to confront your citizens. We don't want you to have to talk to your constituents because you might have to answer questions about what's going on and the cuts that they're making. And the Medicaid cuts don't just affect us here in Maryland's 4th Congressional District. They have a major impact in rural districts, like hospitals, for example, where much of the medical treatment is covered by Medicaid. So, and then senior retirement homes and the like, same thing. So in many of the rural districts, they're looking at an economic disaster if this goes forward. So my view was that I know shutting down the government is not good. We don't want that. I've tried to oppose it every time I could. But in this particular instance, it was something that we needed to do, and that would double back onto Trump and undermine his ability to keep moving forward. The other point, too, though, is, as Chris mentioned a minute ago, Trump's just out of control, and the Elon Musk thing is totally out of control. I got up this morning and saw in the paper that they went to the Institute of Peace and broke in there. And now, yeah, I mean, you're going to go like we're going to do a home invasion of the Institute of Peace? I mean, what are we talking about? Here's the other level of problem. The Institute of Peace is not an executive branch agency. It's not even a governmental agency. So DOGE has absolutely no business being there. In fact, the fact that they went in like they did, which was wrong and strong, was illegal. They broke the law. It's trespassing. Now, I don't know who's going to prosecute that, because you know it's not going to be the Department of Justice under Trump. But that's where they are. And so when you see things like that, and we can go through the litany, remember they fired the nuclear guys, the guys that made, what kind of craziness is that? And then cutting off the clinical trials. You know, my father died from Alzheimer's. I'm a cancer survivor, as many of you know. I damn sure want these clinical trials to move forward on track. But when they disrupt them like they did, not only does it stop it, but it's not like a light switch. You can't just cut it right back on. You got to start from scratch. And some of those that's like millions of dollars lost in the way that they did that. So for me, looking at all of the things that Trump has done, and we'll go through more as we go forward tonight, I just thought it was critical for us to draw the line now, to make the statement to say, no, we're going to block this. You're not going to be able to move forward with this continuing resolution as it is. You're going to have to come back. You're going to have to negotiate with the Democrats, and we're going to have to figure out a way to do this without undermining and hurting the American people. So I thought we should draw the line. 212 of my colleagues agreed on Tuesday. On Wednesday, I think it was Wednesday, Senate Democratic leader, Mr. Schumer, agreed with us. So we're thinking, okay, that's a good thing. I don't know what happened in the next 24 hours, but the next day, he said he's going to reverse and he's going to vote with the Republicans on that bill. Gets worse. It gets worse. They didn't have, so they needed 10 plus Democrats to vote with the Republicans to get to 60, right? he didn't have the 10 going with him. So he had to work with, or reach out to, I'll say, some of his Senate colleagues in order for them to support what he was doing and to vote with the Republicans too. So ultimately we ended up with, I think it was 61 total votes. 62? 62 total votes in support of this continuing resolution. So, Pat, yeah, I don't have all their names with me, but it's important for us to remember a couple of things. One is, one of the real downsides of that happening was it created the ability for Trump to say he had bipartisan support for this bill. And that's not just bad for PR and political reasons, that's bad for legal reasons too. Because one of the things we'll see, and we'll get to the litigation in a minute, but there's key pieces of litigation that are before the courts. One is the impoundment issue. How many of y'all know what the impoundment issue is? Okay, just real quick. The Trump administration is saying, you know what, the Congress has the power of the purse. They say where the money goes, and we as the executive branch, we just facilitate that. But we're not going to do it like that anymore. We're going to seize the money, we're going to impound the money and decide where we want it to go. Now, that violates the Constitution, that violates the Impoundment Act. There's another bill that passed, a statute that passed during the Watergate era that banned that as well. But they're trying to do that anyway. Here's the problem of how this CR hurts us on that front. The way this CR was written, normally a CR is like a page or two long, and so it would say the date that was there, March 14th, strike that date, move it down another 30 days. So we're going to give them another 30 days, April 14th or whatever, to continue to work to get the CR done. Those CRs are about 2 or 3 pages long. This CR was 100 pages long, right? So there are all kinds of things in this Trojan horse. But one of the things that was not there was the typical types of instructions that Congress gives to the executive branch as to where the money's supposed to go and how it's supposed to be spent. So without those directives, it's actually easier for the Trump administration to impound the money that was sent. And if they impound the money, you know what that means, right? Blue states like Maryland could see the money go from us to red states somewhere else. Programs that we think are important to us, he could switch over and send them to, potentially, programs that he'd rather have funded. That's a big problem for us. And so that was one of the other reasons that I opposed it. So I thought it was critical to make sure that we blocked that bill. I was deeply disappointed that Senator Schumer voted with the Republicans. You know you're on bad ground when you get a personal tweet from Donald Trump thanking you for your vote, right? We don't want to be there. We don't want to be there. And it's important for us to make sure that at this critical time, we've got leaders that are going to take us in the right direction. We had Hakeem Jeffries lead the fight against the CR to the tune of 213-1. Schumer was on the other side. Hakeem met the moment, Schumer did not. And so I respect Chuck Schumer. I think he's had a great, long-standing career. He's done a lot of great things. But I'm afraid that it may be time for the Senate Democrats to pick new leadership as we move forward. Let me finish a little bit here on the executive orders, because as you know, there have been dozens of them that have gone out, and they're, I think, over 100. We've got a slide on this with the number of court cases. Why don't you go ahead to where we are next? Skip that one. There we go. 120 lawsuits have been filed. And let me tell you how this has worked, because many of the organizations that were filing these lawsuits and continue to do it, these are small operations that are working around the clock to really make a difference. And they're doing a fantastic job. As you can see, 120 lawsuits filed, 40 court orders blocking the Trump administration's efforts whether it's reducing government employees, whether it's saying you got to be native born, whether it's saying, as the one we had the latest blow up over, you can't just deport people just because you feel like it. Let's pause on that one for a second. And I know I want to give you all a chance to have your Q&A, so I won't go too much longer, but I really want to talk about what happened when Judge Boasberg, who's here in D.C., federal district court judge here in D.C., said, you can't just deport these guys. We're going to have a hearing. You're going to have to prove that you've got the authority to send them out. Well, as it turned out, what the Trump administration had done was they hustled these guys onto a plane, onto 3 planes, and had the planes take off. They had 2 of them take off while the hearing was going, and there was a 3rd plane that took off just as it was ending. But at the hearing, the judge said, and normally these judges in federal court, they're all deliberate, they take time, they say, I'll take it under advisement, they come back with a written order days, weeks, sometimes months later. But in this one, he said, no, if you're trying to send somebody over there right now, you need to stop it. And if you're flying them over, you need to turn those planes around and bring them back. And guess what they did? They kept going. They kept going. And so when they got caught, and this is red-handed, right? They got cold busted. And as Trump does, they came back in and said, well, we had the right. You're just a federal judge. We got elected. We had the right to do this because that's the mandate that we got. And so they kept fighting with the judge. The judge set another hearing on Friday for them to come and explain what they'd done because it's illegal. It's clearly illegal. They actually argued that it wasn't a final order until the judge wrote it down. Now, any of y'all seen Law and Order, you know that when the judge makes a ruling in the court, that's a final order, right? They don't have to stop the trial and say, let me write it down. It's an order when he speaks it, and they know that. But these guys, like I said, wrong and strong. So what did they do? Trump sends a tweet, different from the Schumer tweet. He says, Boasberg, we need to impeach judges like this. Think about that. And he added this on, like the unfair judges that he had to appear in front of. I won't go into the 2 tiers of justice nonsense that he keeps talking about. Mr. Impeached twice, convicted, 34 counts. Still got to be president. You know, for most people, if you're a convicted felon, you can't live in public housing. I'm just saying. Just because the White House is a big house doesn't mean it's still public housing. And he's still living in there, whether he's, okay, anyway. So then, after Trump sends this tweet out, 5 congressmen, some of my colleagues, Republicans, filed articles of impeachment to remove Judge Boasberg. And one of them said he's committed high crimes and misdemeanors. Now, I don't know where that guy went to law school, but ain't no crimes or misdemeanors in what Judge Boasberg did. You just don't like it. So it's so bad that Chief Justice Roberts, and he's no liberal, right? That was no Obama appointee or anything like that. Chief Justice Roberts said, check yourself. Check yourself. We don't impeach judges just because you disagree with their ruling. You can appeal it, but we don't impeach it. Yes, thank you. And the reason this is important, can you go back to the one with the 40, 120 and 40? That's why that's important. He knows he's losing in court. He knows he's losing over and over and over again in court. So now they've started, well, let's do the intimidation thing. Let's go after him like that. So Chief Justice Roberts coming out and defending that judge is maybe one of the biggest developments we've had since Trump got into the White House. It's a very big deal. And it's important for our democracy. I'm going to say, we're going to do questions soon? Yes, sir. Okay. Or should they come up to the mics, or how are we going to do it? Okay. For folks that want to ask questions, start lining up at the mics. We've got one at the end of each aisle. Feel free to come up. We got a lot of them pre-filed, so I have a sense of kind of where most of you want to go. I think almost all of you have questions, variations on government employee questions, and that's fine. We can go through those. Some of them are going to be super specific to you, so we can chat a little bit about it here. But I've got staff all over the room here who can help with your individual case, so we can keep going through the line. And if some of you have already reached out to our office, and I know some of you have because I talked with you beforehand, we can help figure out where things are and the status of things, because things have been evolving really, really quickly. And so sometimes the letter you sent a couple weeks ago, there's different issues, different cases, judges have ruled, that sort of thing. But we'll make sure we're trying to keep up with it. Man, we got a lot of folks lining up. All right, you want to lay out the rules real quick?
All right, everyone, I hope this first rule doesn't have to be said too loudly, but we want to maintain respect and decorum throughout the conversation here. Let's try to keep our comments to questions for the congressman, and let's try to limit our speaking time to 1 minute. We will have a nice handy timer up there. But again, let's just keep the conversation respectful and make sure that we can keep the conversation moving so that we can try to get to as many questions as possible. Thank you, everybody. I'll start with you, ma'am, right here in the purple.
Hi. My name is Mary Touchstone, and I am a senior that lives in a senior building. I am extremely concerned because I realize that this man needs to be impeached. Yes. Everything he has done since he had been in office is totally illegal. I want to know, I don't want you all to wait until. Are you all gathering your facts now? So that as soon as possible, as soon as you all get the majority, you all can then impeach his behind.
Amen. The answer is yes. I'll say this, though. I mean, it's not like he's been trying to hide what he's been doing.
No, he hasn't.
So this is, we don't need Sherlock Holmes to get this case pulled together against this guy. So, but yes, and part of what we want to try and do to prepare for 2026, because we've got to win. House Democrats have to win in 2026. Got to do it. And this is the step to take. So you get, we're doing letters right now. For example, one of my colleagues, Jerry Conley, I think it was, sent a letter out demanding that Elon Musk come and testify before the Oversight Committee in the House. Now, here's the thing. The minority doesn't have the authority to issue a subpoena to make him come, right? Only the majority can do that. Only the Republicans can do that. And you know they ain't going to do that. But in 2027, after we get elected in 2026, I bet Elon Musk's subpoena, that's going to be #1 that goes out. That's going to be #1. So, yes, ma'am, we are. We'll go over here. Wow, before we switch over there, let me make sure we point out our next county executive, Aisha Brayboy, has come to join us. Please stand up. We've had a chance to work together in the past, and we know that part of what's going on here is we're trying to do things at the federal level, but people are going to be hurting at the local level, here at the community level in the county. We're going to be working together with the faith community and others to try and make sure we can do everything we can to help people who get injured in this process and help to facilitate their survival and navigating through it. So thank you so much, County Executive. Soon to be County Executive, Aisha Brayboy. All right, over on this side.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alexandra, and I'm one of your constituents here in District 4. And I am also a member of the American Federation of Government Employees 252 at the United States Department of Education. Last week, as you know, half of the agency was illegally RIFed. Is there anything that Congress is going to do to ensure that those federal employees are put back into their positions? In addition to that, I am very concerned because of the illegal RIFs that we will not be able to enforce the statutes that we are required to enforce and to ensure that monies that were appropriated are spent in the correct way to serve our nation's students. Is there anything that Congress is doing? Are you all working with AFGE and the other federal unions to ensure that our nation's children are taken care of?
Great question. And the answer is yes. AFGE, Everett Kelly, have been some of the strongest allies in working through this. The sad answer, though, of whether we can do something at the moment is we don't have the majority. So we can't vote to do anything as far as moving forward with that. When we get to 2026, if we win and we can take the majority back, then we can move forward on that. But in the short run, we can't.
We'll survive until 2026 at this rate. That's what I'm
I agree. I agree. So the other piece of this, and as you're part of AFGE, so you know this, the court cases, that's why they're so critical. Because the court cases are the bridge to getting us from here to there. And the court cases that have been filed, AFGE's been on, I don't know, the 100 and maybe it's 80 or something of the 120. And you all are putting the money up too. Lawyers don't do it for free, okay? So thank you to AFGE for doing the work, and we're needing the cases to keep going forward. And I can see we're going to have probably more people asking questions than we've got time. I will stick around afterwards, so we'll make sure everybody gets answered, okay? Yes, sir.
Hello, Congressman. My name is Rashad Thomas, and I'm a resident of Hyattsville. Thank you, first of all, for having this town hall and listening to your constituents, unlike your cowardly Republican colleagues. So Kash Patel is crazy. We all can just, stipulate to that.
Yeah.
Personally, would not want him in PG County at any time, but in the last administration, as you know, a decision was made to move the FBI headquarters to gorgeous Prince George's.
Right.
And last week, the president said that's going to be nixed because we're a liberal state or whatever.
Yeah,
so,
he sure did, and he's wrong.
Right. So what are you going to do to ensure that this very important federal asset comes to Prince George's County? Thank you. Thank you.
Couple quick things. We won fair and square, and that was like a 14-year process, a legal process. And so some of you may know that in his first administration, he delayed the FBI move, and the reason he did that was because it's always about personal enrichment for him. He didn't want that building to be torn down and a new hotel be built in that space because he owned a hotel across the street. He didn't want the competition, so he blocked it for 4 years. So it slowed us down for 4 years. I'll agree with that. But we still got back on track, and we got moving, and it's still coming to Greenbelt because we won on the merits. Closest to the metro, costs less than the other sites, can start immediately because you don't have to clear the site, on and on and on. The other problem is that DC doesn't have a space that's big enough for the FBI headquarters for the terrorism perimeter, to protect it from terrorist attacks in the city. So that's why they ruled out DC like, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. So we should be on track. He might delay it, but we should still be on track. Yes, sir. What's that? They got a mic up there? Oh, okay. We'll come to them next.
Okay. So one thing I want to lead with is we all, talk about Trump being a felon. One thing that I don't think we talk enough about is the fact that he's an insurrectionist and constitutionally ineligible to be president.
Right.
That said, does the Democratic Party have a plan in place? Because you've mentioned, 2026 a couple times. Currently, Democratic favorability ratings are under 30%. Is there a plan to, bring the American people back on board? 90 million people stayed home and did not vote in 2024 because they felt like they had been left behind, that they weren't being spoken to. So is there a plan to actually bring them back on board? Because I think that, going after Republican votes at 77 million, we've got 90 million people who aren't voting at all.
Yeah, great point. And I think when we get to 2028 and we've got a presidential cycle coming, then the national turnout's going to matter more for us again. Let me finish. The 2026 vote, though, is only going to be in congressional districts. And we only need 3 seats to take it back. And so there are 20 seats that Republicans hold that Harris won. So we're targeting resources on those 20 seats, because if we can get those, we'll win the House back. We need to hold on to what we've got, but we're focused on, it's a micro-focus race, and we need to win the congressional seats to get the House back. Now, when we're getting up towards 2028 and we need the national piece to go, I'd say one of the biggest mistakes we made in 2024 was we didn't have good national communications with folks. And in fact, there were entire segments of people that the Republicans were reaching that they weren't hearing anything from us. And we didn't find out about it till after the election. Some of that's that podcast stuff. Some of that is the influencers. I'd never heard of Joe Rogan before the election. I'm just saying, I live down the street from you. Well, good, I appreciate it. But we need to make sure that we are reaching out to those people who are listening to those guys and build on that. And we need to build our own communication network so that we're reaching people who want to hear from us, even if they're not hearing from them. Now, I think you're up next on the balcony. Okay, let's take turns.
Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening, Congressman. Jamil Johnson, Prince George's County Muslim Council. One of the concerns that we obviously have, and forgive me if I missed it by the time I came in, but the case of Mahmoud Khalil, the Columbia student, the green card holder that obviously everybody knows his case. This is a situation where no matter how you feel, what side you're on, this is a question of free speech, the First Amendment of the Constitution. And obviously, the person in the White House feels that if you're not taking the side that he's chosen to take, obviously for his own personal reasons, then you should have to leave the country. Now, there was a letter that was done that a number of members of Congress signed on to, opposing this use of free speech. We would have liked to see your name on it. But, you know, as a lawyer, as a former member of the Judiciary Committee, what is your position? What kind of action are you going to take to show opposition to this ridiculous, absurd, and illegal, unconstitutional move?
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a great question. From what I've seen so far, it appears that, as you stated, this is a man who was just exercising his First Amendment rights. The Trump administration said they were limited rights because he's not a citizen. But as I understand it, even with a green card, you got First Amendment rights that are protected. So based on what they've said so far, I think they're acting illegally. There's a case going in New York where they're challenging the attempts to deport him. Trump, just like the thing with Boasberg, they flew him to Louisiana already. So now they're trying to fight over the jurisdiction piece. But I think ultimately New York's going to win because that's where he was taken from. And it sounds like he's going to win on the merits. It sounds like that he should not be deported and that he should be allowed to stay because it's a First Amendment violation. Let me say this, though, too. There's more folks that are having this happen than him. And we've got to make sure that we stay on top of all of this, the efforts to deport people, just like what happened with Judge Boasberg, because sometimes they're grabbing people who are actually citizens. Like they're going through, in our neighborhoods here in Prince George's County, you know, they're talking, it's basically racial profiling. If you look Latino, you're at risk. And so we've got to make sure we fight hard to oppose that on all fronts. Well, in the courts, number one, if we get the Congress back, we need to pass laws to support it. But remember, it's already illegal. Right? So we got to make sure we win in court. We've got to make sure we win in court. All right, here you go, ma'am, right here.
Good evening. I'm Joyce Erb Appelman. I am a retired teacher for Prince George's County Public Schools. I want to begin by thanking you.
Thank you for your service.
I want to begin by thanking you, Congressman Ivy, for beginning this evening by sharing just what's being done to combat what Trump is doing to dismantle and harm our country, our democracy.
Yes, ma'am.
I respect the work many in the Democratic Party are doing to protect our democracy. At the same time, I don't believe we're doing what needs to be done. There needs to be a definitive plan, a message that's being expressed at every level of government. What's being done now to prepare for our 2026 election? And lastly, what do we do in the meantime to survive this dismantling of the government by our democracy? Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. As we mentioned with respect to 2026, the messaging I think we need to focus on is in the particular districts that are up, that are viable for us. We got a chance to win, because if we win even half of those 20, we take the House back, and I think that's a big step for us. Like I said, 2028 is a national presidential election, so you need a national communication strategy that works differently. But in each of those 20 districts, like Omaha, for example, is one of those districts, we just barely lost it last time around. And we've come close in the last two. I think we can get it, because now you've got Medicaid cuts, for example, that are going to impact parts of Nebraska in a way that those folks hadn't had happen 3 months ago. So we've got a chance to win those. But there are going to be particular message issues that are going to be viable and you know, resonate in Omaha that wouldn't necessarily work here or in other, you know, New York or LA or something. So I'm going to defer to them on those particular messaging parts. But whatever they need, the way they need to get it across, we just need to get that done. The second part of your question was, what do we do until, in the meantime? Yeah, I think the critical piece is the courts. We've got to keep winning these cases in the courts. We've got to keep litigating these cases. I think, again, the continuing resolution that was passed undermines some of these cases, just to be honest about it. So we can't have any more of those. We get another chance at this continuing resolution in 6 months in September. We got to make sure the vote goes the right way this time. The Senate's got to do it right this time. So that's there. Yes, ma'am.
Congressman Ivy, thank you very much for hosting this town hall. My name is Barbara, and I am a resident of Prince George's County, one of your constituents. You just teed up my question perfectly, because as a communications professional, I understand that you need to have a good message, you need to be prepared for the next election, but this continuing resolution is coming up in September. And the budget for the 2026 year will begin in October. So what I'm asking of you now, don't talk to me about the courts, don't talk to me about the next election. Talk to me about how you are working with your Democratic colleagues, with our regional colleagues in the Congress and in the Senate, to oppose and make it difficult between now and September to do the kinds of things that we're all complaining about. I love to talk bad about Donald Trump and Chuck Schumer with my friends. I came here to understand what my congressman is specifically doing.
Okay. Well, before we get to September, actually, we've got the budget resolution coming up. And so, and the budget resolution, as I mentioned, was the Medicaid vote. So, and I know you don't want to talk about 2026, but the only way we can win that vote is if we've got Republicans who are paying attention to 2026. And the only way they will pay attention to 2026 is if we create a situation where they think it could help them lose if they vote for it. So, for example, in my view, one of the things Democrats should do is have an alternative tax bill, because the budget resolution is really about Trump doing the $4 trillion tax cut, right? And the $4 trillion, as you know, most of that's going to go to Elon and his buddies. We've got to make sure we explain to regular folks in red districts, blue districts apparently too, where, you know, some of these senators came from, so they understand that that's where that money's going to go. But the Democrats have a different approach. We're going to make sure that if there are going to be tax cuts, it's going to go to regular people. And to the extent there are cuts that go to businesses, it's not going to be Exxon and the offshore guys. It'll be small businesses in our neighborhoods that hire people locally. And I think that makes sense, because it's really better for regular folks. To the extent we had trouble and we lost in 2024, in part, it was because we lost a lot of working class voters, mostly white voters, especially white males, but we started losing young black males and young Latino males too. Many of them voted for Trump in numbers we've never seen before. Now it may be that that's just, they like Trump and there aren't going to be coattails for other elections, but we've got to make sure we start reaching out to them too. We can't just assume that black voters are always going to turn up and save the Democratic Party in every election cycle. We've got to earn them too. So it's connected to 2026, but we've got to make sure that we win the voters now, because if we don't win them now, we're not going to win in 2026. Let me say, I'll give you an example. I just did. Okay, it was vague? Okay. Yes.
Black people. It's black women.
Black women are the backbone of the Democratic Party.
I just want you
No
to
question
always
about
give
it.
us our props, 'cause now it's
Black
not
women are
done.
the backbone of the Democratic Party. Not just nationally, but especially in Prince George's County. Yeah. So that's absolutely true. I guess you're up next, ma'am.
Hillary, I'm from Laurel, Maryland. I'm looking for a name, sir, a name of somebody who can lead people like me who want to take action, because we know Congress can't do anything to stop this man. We know that the federal court might not be able to enforce its own orders to stop this administration. And the people are angry. You can see it outside your own office, sir. There are protests on Capitol Hill almost every day.
Yes.
And across the country, from Annapolis to Anchorage, there are protests, and they're not organized. There's no leader for this. Thousands of people show up because they read something online, someplace like Reddit,
Right.
and there's nobody leading us. Who, sir, can lead the resistance? Who, sir, can maybe organize a march on Washington and peacefully, sir,
Absolutely.
demand that democracy be restored?
Absolutely. I think that's right. I don't know that it's a single individual, but I do think as a collective group we can do that. I'll give you, for example, Black Lives Matter. I guess somebody could name the single individual who led the BLM protests, but I can't, because it was an organic movement of a lot of people who came together and said, you know what, this murder of George Floyd, that can't stand. We're going to get out and protest about that. And so we had that happen at that instance too, and we've had it previously as well. So there's not a Martin Luther King out there waiting to step in, but you know what? I don't know that we need one. If we can actually just pull our forces together and start working together on this, and it's starting to grow. You saw the boycotts that happened with respect to some of the companies. Okay, there you go, there you go. I think that's going to help. The protests that you mentioned that are going on in Washington every day or frequently, and I've been part of those, and it makes sense to have them. Chris has been going too. The key is, though, we need them to grow. Televised is great, but the more people you have out there, the more likely it is they'll get televised. So remember, let me finish the answer. So remember when Trump first got elected, we had an automatic protest of, I forget how many women came. It was women, it was like 100,000 plus, who came to Washington, D.C. and led a protest that had a very good impact. It helped to really shape the beginning part of his administration. We've got to build it back to it so it gets to that point. Now, I think it's important to do that and make sure we're working it on the ground to build that out. But again, ultimately, I really do think it comes down to the elections. Elections have consequences. If we didn't know that before, we definitely know it now. And so we have to build this up for the 2026 elections, in my view, and make sure we win the House back at a minimum. Got to get the Democrats back in control of the House. Yes, ma'am. Well, we appreciate Indivisible. Appreciate y'all coming. We'll do turns again, but thank you, Indivisible, for the great work that you're doing. I do appreciate it. Absolutely do. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. My name is Danya. I am a genealogist. I'm a researcher. I'm also one of the hosts of Genealogy Adventures. You talk about not having the ability to be able to know about the different podcasts and things. I've sent you several messages. I've sent you, I've sent Angela Alsobrook, I've sent Senator Van Hollen. You may know me from the person that sent you the message, hey, put me in on one of those cabinet meetings. I've actually sent messages through to my family and friends, letting them know to send all of you letters, letting you know that we want to be in on the cabinet meetings like Elon Musk, because he's a regular person. He's in there. He just got money. So with that being said, I'm trying to get in on the cabinet meeting too, because I'm the one that has the biggest problem. It ain't him. So with that being said, I invite you onto my show. I invite you, I invite Miss Brave Boy, I invite everybody onto my show, because you didn't know Joe Rogan, that's sad, but we're going to talk about that later.
I appreciate it.
But
School
I want
me.
you to be on,
School
I
me
want
on
you
that.
to be on my show,
Yeah.
and I need y'all to do that, because y'all need to stop acting like you don't know who we are, because that's what you just did when you said that.
Okay.
You
Joe Rogan.
You literally said you didn't know who we were. And because you don't know who we are, that's a problem.
And the we is who?
Huh?
Who is the we that you mean that I don't know?
Us. Everybody who's sitting here right now.
I know these people.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
If you didn't even know who Joe Rogan was and you don't know
Joe
what a
Rogan's
podcast-
not here. I don't represent Joe Rogan.
But it's not about
Okay.
Joe Rogan. It's about the name itself.
Okay.
You don't know anything about a podcast. And as a Democrat senator who's representing all of these people, you don't know how to reach them. So therefore, you don't know us.
All right. Well, I'll say this and I'll move on. I appreciate all of you all coming out. Somehow they got the message to come tonight. We reached them somehow, whether it was through Indivisible or others, whether it's through emails. We do a lot of outreach. And the last point, let me finish. The last point I'll make on that is, it is a fair point to say that the Democratic Party was behind the Republicans on that. There's no question about it. What we're trying to do now, and there's a group led by Lauren Underwood in the House Democratic Caucus, and she's 35 or so she's a lot younger than me. And so she's able to try and do more of the outreach. And she knows these folks. So for example, let me finish. You had your chance. So one of the things we did, for example, on the so-called State of the Union that Donald Trump did, that I boycotted that. And instead of going to that, thank you, we met with influencers who do podcasts, African Americans from across the country. Angela Rye was one of those, and I was happy to sit with her. Roland Martin was another one. We were just talking yesterday. Love Roland Martin, no question. And then there are others who are doing, they're building their representations, their communities up, and we can help to do that together. But the key is to make sure that we turn to each other and not on each other in doing the outreach. So, okay, yes, sir. Yeah, tap it. There you go.
All right, thank you. Well, thank you. My name is Datro Ward. I currently live in the new home to the future FBI headquarters, Greenbelt, Maryland.
There you go.
I just want to say I don't listen to podcasts, but everybody doesn't get their information there. I get mine from the news. Everybody doesn't get theirs from the news.
Right.
I think what the real problem is, there is a message issue. I don't know what you guys want to use to get the message out, but the message is not getting out well. I watch CNN, MSNBC every day. I see propaganda that's full of lies from the Donald Trump administration.
Right.
Nothing about what you guys are doing to save or help or protect us. I see propaganda all day long. And one of the things that really upset me is you mentioned that you declined going to that man's whatever you want to call it, which I totally respect, because the Democrats are a party of decorum, but there's no decorum anymore.
Right.
He had an address where all he did was lie,
Right.
use derogatory terms towards a senator's ethnicity or her background. Like, there is no decorum. So why
Right.
is the Democrat party holding on to decorum that no longer exists in this country.
Right.
So I think if we're gonna look towards 2026, 2027, 2028, we gotta tap into everybody who's listening. We gotta reinvigorate, fire up the base. And we can't be worried about doing what's right, because they're not doing what's right. What's right is already out the window. And put it out there. I don't know if it's gonna be on a podcast, on the news, on whatever, just put a message out there.
Right.
In every way you could do it. And not just you, like, that's why I thank you for being here, but I think what's really going on is a poor message issue. People don't know what
No,
you
I
guys
think that's
are doing.
fair. I think that's fair, and it's, part of it's the communication, we're not doing as much outreach, and part of it is we're not doing it well. So I'll give you an example. When Biden, his first 2 years in the White House, when you had Pelosi running the Congress, were some of the most legislative productive years in the history of the country, certainly since LBJ. Great legislation was passed. Here's the problem. We didn't do a good job of explaining to people what got done. So we would talk in the alphabet, like ARPA got passed or IRA got passed. And so we didn't tell them that behind that, well, that was your prescription drugs got capped at $35, or that's the reason that new bridge got built over by you in Louisville, Kentucky, or that's why you get the new internet access, because we put the lines down. So we've got to do a better job of explaining the specifics of what's going on. That's number one. Number two, to your other point, we're having trouble breaking into the he's sucking all the oxygen out of the room. So every day you open up the paper or cut on the news, and there's something Trump has done. And part of it is the fact that it's so outrageous, it just dominates the news. So I haven't even gone home and cut the news on yet, but him calling for the impeachment of a federal judge will be one of the lead stories of the day. We have to make sure that we have the ability to try and get in the middle of that too. It's harder though, because even Hakeem Jeffries doesn't have a platform as big as the president's. So we've got to find other ways to do it. That's one of the reasons we're trying the targeted efforts in the 20 districts where we can win those. The other is we have to do some paid advertising to do it.
And that's what you're mentioning is actual news. The stuff I see is not news.
That's right.
It's just straight lies about him saying what he's doing. He's rounding up all these people, taking like photoshops and videos, glamour shots of them dragging these people with their heads down, chopping off their hair. That's totally inhumane. It's just selling cars. It's like BS. It's not news. It's just propaganda. We've
got to make sure that we're putting out our version of what's going on and explain it, and also point out, as you just did, what's false about what he's doing. Like going out and grabbing everybody that looks Latino is not making our communities safer. It's just violating the Constitution with illegal conduct.
Thank you.
So I think you're right. Okay, let's go over to this.
Sir, we're going up top. We're going up top. Let's go up there, please. There have been a couple of folks waiting.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Hi,
Sorry.
yeah, there are a lot of people up here also, Congressman. Yeah. Congressman, my name is John. I live in North Prince George's County, the best county in America, but also a county that is hurting because the backbone of our community, as you know, is people who are career federal officials. And I will tell you something, career federal officials overwhelmingly feel abandoned by their Democratic representatives and senators. Congressman, I cannot sufficiently emphasize this to you. The message that was sent by Democrats in Congress with the CR catastrophe was clear. It's not that you're in the minority. It's that you aren't even working together on a shared strategy. And that is failure. So to be clear, Congressman, the message you should clearly take to your colleagues from your constituents is this. We are not interested in hearing that you are in the minority. We know that. We want you to show some of the backbone and strategic brilliance that Mitch McConnell would have in the minority.
Right.
We want you to show fight, and you are not fighting. We are on the front lines, and you are talking about 2026. Democrats should win in 2026, but those Democrats may need to be the people who beat incumbents in primaries for being too passive now. If you want airtime, be disruptive. And you voted correctly on the CR. Please take the message to your colleagues. We must primary those who are against us, and we feel that Democrats in Congress are against us. This must change, Congressman. This must change.
Yeah, I agree. And I think your point about the vote on the CR is right. I mean, you know, as we said at the beginning of this, that was a devastating vote. It was a huge, not just a missed opportunity, but like really devastating to folks, especially after he said initially he was going to vote for it and then flip. He just asked me about this. He just asked me about that. I'm going to answer his question. I'm going to answer his question. I'm going to answer his question. You'll get a turn. You will get a turn, but it's not your turn. It's his turn. I'm going to answer his question, okay? I'm going to answer his question. I'm going to answer his question. I'm going to answer his question. You're not going to get me upset. I'm going to answer his question. I'm going to answer. You can stand here and yell as long as you want, but I'm going to answer his question because everybody in here wanted to hear the answer. And they have the right. They have the right. They have the right to ask. They have the right to ask questions. They have the right to ask questions. They have the right to ask questions. They have the right to ask questions too. You got to wait your turn. You got to wait your turn. That's not going to work. That's not going to work. That is not going to work. That is not going to work. I'm going to answer his question. That's not going to work. That's not going to work. It's not going to work. You can stand there and yell as long as you want. It's not going to work. I'm going to answer that question. 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 If you want to ask a question, come get in line. If you want to ask a question, come get in line. If you, okay. I'm going to answer his question. You're not going to stop us from having this meeting. You are not going to stop us. I might have to ask you to remind me what the question was, but because it's been a minute now. But I do want to go back to what you were saying. I think it's critical to make sure that the Senate gets the message, especially the senators that voted with the Republicans. We've got to make sure that that goes differently in 6 months. We've got to make sure we win that vote 6 months from now. We really do. All right. Who was next? I think you were next, sir.
My name is Marcus Waters. I'm a constituent in your...
Can y'all hold it down so I can hear the question, please?
So there has been reporting, and even the president has bragged about potentially tampering or potentially rigging this last election. I know you have introduced or supported bills that would strengthen the integrity of our elections previously. Would you support the Democratic Party making it mandatory for each candidate to request an audit as well as a hand recount of the paper ballots for future election cycles? And would you support at least vocally? Would you at least vocally support groups that are calling for or doing the process of forensic audits and hand recounts?
Well, I'd be open to recounts if the election's close. I would be open for that. So I'll give you an example. So in 2020, when Trump was saying the election was stolen, he went to 60 different jurisdictions, and he lost all 60 cases to federal judges, Republican and Democrat. And even if he'd won any of those, it wasn't close enough to change the outcome. So if Trump had asked for a recount of the national, I would have said no. But if it's a close election where it could be an impact, I would agree with that. And I think most states permit that.
So not just, kind of follow up or?
Okay, real quick.
Not just in any close election, just in elections period, because the data that has been kind of analyzed by, just to throw out a group, Election Truth Alliance, they have shown that there is potential that elections have been rigged this election, even in the 2020 cycle, through the same method. So, I mean, just as a precaution, if you can't get a bill through, you can just demand a recount of a hand, and that'll clear up any confusion. And that's been the kind of like our main messages to get 2026 to vote then and win back the House. And if these election tampering softwares are out there, how is that really possible?
Well, I mean, if there's actual evidence of election tampering in a particular election, and it's a close election and it could affect the outcome, I'd be open to that, but not just every election. It's millions of dollars to do that. And so, and I also think it sort of feeds into conspiracy theories that elections are stolen if you're doing it over and over again. Because even if you do a recount, they're going to say it was the same thing. So, maybe, but under certain circumstances. Yes, sir.
Hi. Good evening. Can you hear me okay? Oh, thank you, sir. Good evening, and thank you, Congressman. I'd like to ask you a general question about the corrupting influence of money in politics. Most, if not all of us, understand that Elon Musk's wealth allowed him to purchase an unjust amount of influence over our government. He donated $250 million to Trump's campaign and now has the power to dismantle our government as an unelected official. The topic of campaign finance reform is very important, and I personally like the idea of publicly funded elections. Political campaigns should be funded by the federal government's tax revenue instead of corporations and PACs. That way, big moneyed interests that plague both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party would be eradicated. The voice of the American people would no longer be drowned out by the voice of corporate interest groups and political action committees. Do you think that the Democratic Party is complicit in the current campaign finance crisis by accepting donations from corporations and political action committees such as Amazon, Walmart, Meta, JP Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, Coinbase, Lockheed Martin, and the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, otherwise known as AIPAC? These groups are listed as contributors to your campaign on the Federal Election Commission's website. So do you think that the Democratic Party is complicit in the current campaign finance crisis by accepting donations from these groups?
Well, I guess the answer is kind of. And what I mean by that is the big donation numbers that you're talking about don't go directly to candidates. They're called independent expenditures. And so you'll have an entity that'll set something up like Elon Musk. He didn't actually give the whole $250 million to Donald Trump's campaign. Right. He spent money on independent expenditures. They're spending it now on independent expenditures. So what that means is the money doesn't go to the candidate. They just run ads or whatever political activity they want through a separate entity they set up. And it can be supporting that candidate. In fact, that's why they do it. But according to the Supreme Court, there's a constitutional right to do this. So even if you're not taking those dollars directly, you can't because there's a cap on what you can receive. I think for Congress it's like $3,500. Right. But if it's going through some other entity, even though it's helping a particular member, it's not counted in that way. It's just a separate. The Constitution says they have the right to do it independently if they want to.
Right. So you believe money? I mean, Citizens United basically says that money is speech. You would agree?
I don't think it's true. I disagree with the ruling, but it's the law of the land. So,
fair
you
enough.
know, many years. You need a constitutional amendment to do that.
Fair enough.
You know, the first bill I worked on. Hold up.
You would win. Campaign finance reform. Publicly
You know,
funded.
I hate to answer because he interrupted you, but I mean, the bottom line though is. Independent expenditures are not going away anytime soon. The bill that I worked on when I was a staffer 30 years ago was called McCain-Feingold. And that was aimed at trying to get money out of politics by setting these restrictions on what was called then soft money. And that was passed, and it was successful for about 5 minutes, because then they set up the independent expenditures process to loop around it. So within, I mean, the ink wasn't even dry on the bill before it got circumvented.
Right.
So unless we can fix this, and I think it's unlikely that's going to happen anytime soon, it's going to continue in that way. The key, I think, is to make sure that we try and raise the money. The real counterpoint to what's happened on that front is the growth in small donor donations. It started with Barack Obama, and it's grown. So you've got people who can raise millions of dollars with $5 and $10 increments. So Obama had grandmothers giving him $10 a month. That added up. Before Barack, nobody thought that was a good way to raise money. But what they saw was when you got enough people together to do that, you could raise money. And he did. At that point, he'd raised more than anybody in the history of the country.
Right.
So that's the counterpoint that we need to focus on.
Okay, I appreciate it, and God bless you. And I just want to say, you know, there was someone who was asking who's going to lead the resistance. All of us here, we are the leaders of the resistance. And I just want to say there is a protest coming up April 5th. It is called the Hands Off Rally. April 5th, it is a nationwide protest. Get involved if you're able to get involved, because we are the resistance. Thank you.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
Testing, testing.
Tap it, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. April 5th. Hope everyone will be there. Congressman Ivy, my name is Kathy Ogle. I live in Upper Marlboro. Thank you so much for having this town hall meeting, something that Republicans are afraid to do, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I want to tell you that I am terrified because we are moving very quickly to an authoritarian state. This is not business as usual. Congress is being crippled. The judiciary is being threatened, and people who are not elected are going into our agencies and taking over the data system. They have our Social Security information. They have the Treasury data. This is not business as usual.
Agree. I agree.
When someone deports someone or tries to deport someone like Mahmoud Khalil, that is not just a problem because one man may be deported. It is a problem because he was disappeared for 36 hours and his wife and his lawyer did not even know where he was.
Right.
And you know how it goes, right? First they come for the Jews, then they come for the socialists. First they will come for the immigrants. They will come for anyone who is vulnerable. And then they will eventually get around, of course, to their political opponents, but they will eventually get around to others of us. Congressman, I think you are polite, you are knowledgeable, you are well-spoken, you are everything we need in a congressperson in ordinary times, and we need something for non-ordinary times. Senator Van Hollen didn't just vote no, he voted hell no, right? That's what we need to see. We need to see hell no. And thank you for being polite with us. But when it comes to fighting these fights, we need you to be a little bit less polite, a little bit more hell no instead of a little bit no.
Fair enough.
And there may be a time when you and other congresspeople need to do civil disobedience. You need to be arrested.
Sure.
And I will go with you. I will stand next to you and be arrested. These are the times we are in. We need to show greater resistance than what we are showing now, and thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Yes, sir.
We got one up top as well.
Congressman, the young lady from Upper Marlboro just stole my question. I was going to ask if you were going to be willing to be arrested, but I'm going to ask you a different question.
I'd be willing to be arrested again. Yes. Yeah. I've done it before.
So I want to talk about town halls like this one. And first I want to applaud this crowd for keeping its bearing when there was an uncivil interruption to these proceedings. And when we act like civil citizens, even though we're angry and pissed, when we act like civil citizens in these spaces, that's when we show our power, right? We don't devolve, we maintain our bearing. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about town halls. We talked about outreach, we talked about messaging, talked about podcasts. Absolutely, I listen to podcasts. But there's an opportunity that some of your colleagues are seeing, and I want to ask if you're willing to do the same. Because we can't just win power by convincing everybody in this room that we're right. There is a sliver of the electorate that voted for him, but they didn't vote for this. And we can shame them, or we can give them a hand and win them over and say, come back.
Right.
And some of your colleagues, Bernie Sanders, AOC, others, are doing a tour around the country right now. They're going to Republican districts where cowardly Republicans have not held town halls like this one. And they are explaining to these voters that chaos is meant to distract us, cruelty is meant to demoralize us from the corruption. And they are explaining how the Democrats can be the party of the working people again and truly oppose the elites that are robbing our government before our eyes. My question to you is, will you go to Andy Harris's district and have a town hall because he's too chicken to face his voters? You seem like a smart, capable, confident man, Congressman. I want you to go to District 1, and I want you to have a town hall to those voters and explain how we can be the party for them.
Yeah, I'd be open to that. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Oh,
Person we
I'm
got
sorry.
up top,
Up in the
up top.
balcony.
Congressperson, hello. My name is Haroon, and I live in College Park. I have called your office from October 8, 2023 till February 2024, almost every single day for you to advocate for a ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire, and an arms embargo in Gaza. And all I heard were excuses from your office that supporting something like this is anti-Semitic. I have Jewish friends.
No, you didn't hear that from my office.
I have emails.
You did not hear that from my
I have
office.
emails.
Let me tell you what you heard from my office. I support a bilateral ceasefire. Yeah. At the beginning, when I was saying that was unpopular, but I still feel that way. And I think it's clear at this point that the only way to actually reach a ceasefire is if Israel and Hamas both agree to it. So that's been my position for the whole 16 months, and it hasn't changed now.
But America always has an upper hand in initiating those conversations. Our taxpayer dollars are funding the Israeli war machine every single day. My city of College Park sends $2 million every single year to Israel. We have the upper hand. We can stop. We can have an arms embargo and let Israel know that come to the peace table, have those discussions, negotiate. We can pressure the Israeli government. Why can't we do that?
Well,
I never in the last 8 years I thought I would agree with Marjorie Taylor, but last night she tweeted that she wants to see ceasefire. That this is not our war. This is not our war.
Okay. I mean, I support a ceasefire as long as it's a bilateral agreement. As far as sending no weapons to Israel, I do not support that. Fair enough. But I do appreciate the fact, you know, the way the war in Gaza got started, the use of the 2,000-pound bombs was way too destructive, no question about it. And that's why so many people died at the front end of that, civilians. But the use of the weapons, for example, with respect to Hezbollah in Lebanon, I'm totally in support of that, and I thought it was very effective that they did it. The use of the weapons in Syria and Iran, I totally support those too. And the fact that, you know, Ukraine is great because they're fighting Russia and keeping Putin busy. So when Assad wanted to leave and he was going to go into exile out of Syria, before that he reached out to Putin to see if he would help. And Putin couldn't do it. So the reason Assad was ready to leave and having trouble in Syria was in part because of Israel and what they were doing there. And so I appreciate your view. I take your point. This is my view on it. And the other part of it too is with respect to Iran, I definitely want Israel's support in addressing that. I certainly don't want Iran to get nuclear weapons. I really don't. Okay. So those are my views. Those are my views. So yes, ma'am. Or were you next? I don't. Were you? It was her. Okay.
I'm Kathy Bartolomeo, Greenbelt constituent of yours, and I've emailed you and called you many times during the week. I'm a member of Code Pink, Jewish Voice for Peace, American Friends Service Committee, and Hamas has agreed to a ceasefire along with Israel, but from day one, from the ceasefire, they have still continued the killing. I am so disappointed with the Republican Party and the Democrats. At this time, 535 members of Congress are in House. Every one of them, except for 13 members, accept AIPAC money, and the influence of AIPAC has a huge influence on what's happening in our world. USA is a #1 arms dealer, exporting 7 times more weapons than China, 5 times more than Russia. The Pentagon has failed multiple times of audits, and there's lots of corruption there. So I'm wondering, you've taken nearly $3 million from the last time for your election for AIPAC. Sarah Elfath, Representative Elfath, who just joined Congress, she surpassed you by almost $5 million. Are you going to continue taking AIPAC money?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Now, just to be clear, well, just to be clear, the $3 million you're talking about, remember I did the independent expenditures conversation? That's where that money went. But I'm not turning money away from AIPAC. Generally speaking, I agree with their positions. I do still favor a 2-state solution. I don't know if they still do or not, but I still favor a 2-state solution. There you go.
Say that AOC doesn't take any money. A waitress from Brooklyn. But I have a procedural question about the CR, just so I can get a deeper understanding. I know that the vote was on cloture, correct, to allow the CR to go forward.
Yes.
We've mentioned voting in September, and we've mentioned also, you mentioned that things go to the committee. I'd like to have a deeper understanding about the steps that fill in those.
The step, you mentioned committee?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned, and maybe I misunderstood what you said, that the CR goes to individual committees, whatever that budgetary.
Yeah, well, that's the budget resolution. The instructions that go from the budget resolution go to individual committees, and they have to figure out how to meet the instructions they're given. In this instance, it was $881 billion in cuts to the Energy and Commerce Committee. The only place big enough to cover those cuts is Medicaid. So even though the Republicans were saying they weren't going to cut Medicaid and the bill didn't explicitly require that, the math requires it. The math makes it clear that that's what happened. So that's what I meant by that. Is that what you're trying to get at?
Well, I guess I'm trying to figure out what happens with the CR between now and September.
It's going to be law. Well, it is law because Trump signed it after the Senate passed it. So it's the law of the land for the next 6 months. Now, in the interim, what's supposed to be happening is the appropriations committees in the House and the Senate are supposed to be figuring out what the bills are individually going forward. And then they'll pass them that way. That hasn't happened in years. So what you'd probably end up with is another either CR or omnibus, some collective bill that puts all the appropriation spending together and then gets it through. But that's going to require the 60 votes. So the reason I brought that up is that is our next chance to have a cloture vote where we can win the vote and make the point that we need and block what Trump and Musk are doing. That's our next best shot.
So So I guess a follow-up to that would be, what are the Democrats going to do to keep the caucus together so we don't have runaway trains voting for, these horrible things that are going to hurt so many Americans?
Well, I think Hakeem Jeffries will continue to hold the House Democratic Caucus together. He's done it over and over and over again on these major bills, so I think that'll happen. It's the Senate that's the open question, and ironically, they're the ones that actually have the leverage done. So if we can make sure that we get the right leadership in the Senate to get it done this time and hold them together and vote with the House Democrats, we can actually have an impact. So. Yay, outstanding. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. I thought he wasn't in line.
Yep, up top.
Okay. Okay.
Hi, Congressman. My name is Pamela. I come from Clinton, Maryland, and I'm a retired Postal Service employee, and my husband currently works for the post office. We have a lot of concerns about what is going on in the federal government. We know that it will only eventually dwindle down to us. I really don't have a question for you, but I want to say I understand that you are between a rock and a hard spot. And what I have to say is more for the people here. We are waiting for this leader to come and with shining armor that we can follow and not do our own work. Protesting is great, and I've done that since the 60s, and I continue to do that today. But what we need, people, we need a movement. We need a movement now. So, Congressman, thank you so much for holding this. I really got upset long time ago, but by the time I got over here, I cooled off. The lady that was irate, that sister is scared. She's afraid. The lady that's looking for a leader, she's humbling from her heart. Can somebody just help me and let me follow you?
Yes, ma'am.
So when you speak so calmly and we are so afraid and we are also angry, it creates that feeling in us that, oh, this is just the same old thing. And I personally don't think we're going to get to 2026. So I think what we need, and I'll protest with all of you, Indivisible and everybody else, but people, we need a movement. A movement.
I agree. I agree.
Good evening.
Yes, okay.
Lisa Leverett Bailey, retired United States Army, 30 years service. Disabled veteran. I left my home 1976 in the WAC Corps. And I stayed till 2006 and retired from Fort Bragg as a Special Operations Sergeant. I volunteered to give my life. I left my kids behind. I had 3 and I had to raise them by myself. I dare Elon Musk to go into my files to see why I'm disabled. First of all, there's a HIPAA law that's supposed to cover me.
Right.
Second of all, it's none of his business.
Yes.
Because he's from South Africa, who never did anything. And now I'm going to
agree.
talk about Trump, who avoided going to the military 5 times, who felt that he was better than anybody else.
Right.
We soldiers, we military armed forces, you seen us Saturday? You ain't seen nothing yet. If they mess with our paychecks, it's going to be a war. And I mean a war. Okay? I don't agree with nothing that he's doing. There's a way of doing everything. Yeah, there is some contracts out there that shouldn't be there, but you're not the one to go pick and pull them.
Right.
All right? Because you never did anything in the United States, first of all. I thank you, because I know who you are, VFW 9376. And I just thank you for this opportunity. But look, if you're former military, go in your records, my VA, make your copies of your disabilities, okay? Then go to your Social Security files and make copies of your Social Security files of when you start paying into the Social Security and when it ends. Then go in there and pull when you start receiving your Social Security. Because if that man gets in our files, he's going to wipe it clean. I don't know how he's getting into our files. When there's a HIPAA law, I'm not understanding it. Maybe you can explain to us, Congressman.
He's breaking the
Ivy.
law.
Oh, well, he's going
breaking the law.
He's going to get broke.
Yeah. There we go. There we go. There we go. Okay, yes.
Okay, so I have a few questions. My name's Naima. I'm from New Carrollton. I'm a researcher at the Largo Hospital.
Okay. Closer to the mic.
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
Yes, okay. So my first question is about what we can do, what you can do as a congressman currently, procedurally, like, oh, I wrote it down, like using points of order, like using unanimous consent, slowing down, mucking up, keeping it, you know, every day these things don't get passed is another day that my trans son doesn't have to fear for his life.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Or that another worker or a friend of mine at the State Department doesn't get fired. You know, so I would like to know what type of things you guys can do now, right now. Secondly, I'm an election judge. I work at the college. Every year and every presidential election, we have thousands of students who show up and vote because they're so excited. These are kids who are under 21. None of them know what they're doing. 80% of them vote provisional because they're at the wrong place. They don't have their registration. I was there till 5 a.m. this past November, signing people up. Still, that voting block is who you all need to talk to. I know that we're always fighting over the white man over here and, you know, the people who are going to flip from one or whatever. When you have all these Gen Zers who are petrified, angry, and ready to vote, but don't know how. So please reach out to them.
I agree. I agree. Absolutely.
I have one little last piece, which is that, and you mentioned all the great things that Biden did, and I'll just tell you I'm a progressive. So from my point of view, and I think a lot of people's point of view, it doesn't feel like it's enough. So for instance, he passed that law that got 7 pills reduced, insulin for everybody, right? Which was great.
Which appeals?
I'm sorry?
You passed the law that did what?
He passed the law, he passed the law that allowed reduction of prices for insulin and a number of other a number of other pills, when a lot of us would just rather have universal health care. There's plenty of people who can't afford their blood pressure medicine.
Right.
And the Democratic is always doing these incremental, the smallest portions, and that's why I think a lot of people don't trust them and don't feel like they're going to do anything. So they put a psycho in office because he is doing something. And he's doing crazy shit, but he's doing something. And that's why he ended up back there. So we need to know that the Democrats are going to do something. Even if it's crazy, let it be on the other side of crazy. Give us what we need instead of just giving us a tiny bit of what we need.
No, fair enough. But think about it this way, and I don't totally disagree about the Biden piece. It was incremental. The challenge, though, was even when we had the trifecta, we'd get all this stuff through the House, but it wasn't getting through the Senate because of Manchin and Sinema. And so they needed the 60 votes. And as somebody pointed out earlier, the McConnell piece, he never went, right? Whenever he could block it using cloture, he did it every time. And when Obama was the president, he just did it all the time that he could. So I think it's fair to say that it was incremental, but we were able to get some of those things done and try and move them forward. If Harris had won, I think we could have moved him even further forward too. So next over here. I'll try and pick it up a little bit because we've got a lot more people to go and we're going to try and cover as many as we can.
Good evening, Congressman, and thank you. I'm Blaine. I'm from College Park, Maryland. After we win back the House and hopefully the Senate in the future, what reforms to the structure and processes of our democracy would you be willing to make to ensure that political extremists no longer grab power in our government and to ensure that we citizens have faith in our democracy? I feel, and I'm afraid, that if we don't make a change, Trump will someday be gone and things just won't get better. Specifically, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on issues like adding term limits to the Supreme Court, term limits to members of Congress, perhaps changing the way we vote, or maybe campaign finance reforms. Now, I know these are all big asks, and someone earlier asks about campaign finance reform, and it feels like you kind of brushed them off and said that requires a constitutional amendment, so we're not going to do that. But we need big ideas. We need ambition. We need to put these things in the cultural zeitgeist to get people on board. If the Democratic Party adopted a platform that was ambitious, I feel like more people would be willing to rally behind it. These are ideas that people understand. These are ideas that people can get behind. And if it won't work at the federal level, maybe you believe that, you could at least work with people at the local level. You could work with Miss Braveboy, you could work with my mayor over in College Park to set some of these precedents, to use them as a test bed and a launching board toward the federal government to see what plans can work and how we can fix the federal government so people have more faith in our democracy.
Okay. Let's take public financing as an example, because that is happening locally, right? Nobody uses it because they raise more money circumventing it. So the only candidates we've had actually use public funding are the ones that can't raise more money. And so the last gubernatorial election was a big example of that. So I'm not saying I disagree with the ideas, but I will say this. Almost everything you mentioned has been in the Democratic platform. In fact, probably in 2024 and definitely in 2020. The public's not voting on those. Trump won on the economy. Trump won on a lesser extent on immigration. Trump won on a lesser extent on the smears about transgender people. So the point that you made earlier about making sure we protect democracy, part of it is we've got to win on the misinformation fight. And we're just not doing a good job with it. So if we make sure that we reach people, get them correct information, as we were just talking about earlier, y'all raking me over the coals about not knowing Joe Rogan, but the key is that the Democratic Party needs to reach those folks too, because there are people who are listening to Joe Rogan apparently, who would be open to these kinds of ideas. We've got to make sure we present those ideas to them.
People don't have faith in our leaders, and that's why they're going to people that produce misinformation, like the Joe Rogans or even farther crazier people. So we need people that we believe in, people that are pushing these ideas so that we have faith in our democracy.
Let's take that point for example, okay? Why don't people believe in, let's say, Kamala Harris? Did you hear some of the misinformation campaigns that were stated about her? Or what about Barack Obama's daughters? Did you hear that stuff? So I don't think it's fair to say that Barack Obama was not a good leader because there was misinformation out there about it. And there's a lot of people that believe this stuff. There's a lot of people that still believe he was born in Kenya. You know, they still do. But we can't convince all of them. But we've got to make sure we reach that sliver somebody over here talked about of the persuadable voters. We've got to make sure we reach them, get them the correct information, and do it in a way that'll win them over to our side. That's how it's going to happen. But the guys that stormed the Capitol on January 6th, they're not part of this agenda. They really aren't. The Proud Boys are not down with that. The guys that blew up Oklahoma City or Charlottesville where they ran a car into the crowd, they aren't the ones we're going to win over. We've got to make sure we understand that that's how they are, that's where they are, and we've got to beat them anyway. Even if we don't win them over, we've got to find the voters that we can persuade by doing it the right way. So when we had this debate last week, the point I made on that front was, and we were talking about protests, we've got to do it the right way, and we have done it the right way. That's how we had Selma and Birmingham. That's how we had the March on Washington. That's how we had the Black Lives Matter movement. While they had Oklahoma City, Charlottesville, and then January 6th when they stormed the Capitol. And then Trump had the nerve to pardon those guys and act like that was the right, because he said they were patriots. That's where those folks are. We've got to beat them where they are. They're wrong, they're strong, but we can still beat them anyway, and that's how we got to do it. Yes. Come on, Dan, you know you can wait in line. Come on. Dan, you can wait in line. Come on, come on. Do it the right way. Yes, sir.
Oh, yes. First of all, I'd like to thank all the taxpayers in Prince George's County for my chair and all the taxes that they gave me as a disabled veteran. Next, Congressman, I got your back.
Thank you.
I served 31 years in the Marine Corps. 3 tours of Vietnam.
Wow.
Combat, all combat. I've given everything I got. I don't have no more but my physical self. There's a few more things I want to say. There's only two entities that I'm afraid of. One is God. Second, my wife back there. Nobody brings fire like she do.
All right.
But the veterans, we are suffering. I just came from the VA. I saw a lot of people walk out, and I asked them why. They were brought in to work, then they were sent home on leave. For what? Because he is angry? Because he got caught with his hand in a cookie jar?
Yeah.
That is not right.
All right, I agree.
And the last thing I want to say, how can I say this? Close your eyes and think of the name Stonewall Jackson Wright Jr. Do you know what nationality he is? Nobody knows. It's me. When I was in the Marine Corps, I went from a slick private to a Chief Warrant Officer 4 because of my name. And it just hurts me to see I gave all the blood, all the sweat,
Yeah.
and dead bodies everywhere around the world for this country. And I hate to see a man like him step in there and just say, he done something. He ain't done anything.
Right.
Him and Musk, they haven't done anything.
I agree. I agree. By the way, the PACT Act was included, cuts to the PACT Act, which was put in place to help veterans who were got sick while they were in combat. They cut $23 billion out of the PACT Act for that. So I'm told we've got a hard stop. Is it 8:30? 8:30 because the school has to start closing. So
We got one up top as well.
okay. Tell you what we'll do. If we can really go fast, you guys put them up. So, okay, ma'am over here, you want to go real quick? Do them quick.
Okay, quick. My father drove a supply truck during World War II and hit one of those bombs, and he was in the Army hospitals in the States for 5 years before he got to see his son, who was 5 then. He's buried in Arlington Cemetery with Purple Hearts and everything.
Yes,
and my
ma'am.
husband, my deceased husband, is buried in Cheltenham. Both of them were so disgusted with treatment at veterans hospitals that they refused to go to them. They went to private hospitals.
Yes, ma'am.
And they were starting to get better, but now, how can you get service when you don't have the people to do it?
That's right. That's right.
The second point I want to make.
Make them quick.
Okay.
Make them quick.
I worked for 11 different agencies before I retired from the federal government. I'm proud of my federal service.
Okay.
But I noticed, I was working with ATF when we were inventorying every Uzi in the United States.
Okay. Get to
What
it for
money
me.
made them cut the project? We were almost through, we were 3/4 through with it.
That's right.
They didn't want them inventory weapons of mass destruction. And now look what we have.
That's right.
Money, money. I hit a pothole and got a flat tire last week, but I thought about Biden and the infrastructure work that he had passed. And I
Okay.
hope that goes through.
Yes, ma'am.
So,
All right.
okay, I'm going to stop at that
We
point.
got one
Thank
up
you
top
so
as well,
much. Yes,
sir.
ma'am.
Thank you.
It'll start.
Okay, there we go. I have a couple of questions, but I will make them quick. Earlier you mentioned people losing access to healthcare and healthcare becoming more expensive because of Trump's policies. I know that a lot of Republicans champion states' rights. What can we do to twist that ideology and help Marylanders? You know, can we establish universal health care for the state of Maryland to protect us here? If they're going to champion states' rights and give more power to states, can we help people on the state level more? What can we do to make sure that Democrats who don't obstruct Trump don't get reelected or continue to be promoted by the Democratic Party?
Okay.
How can we ensure that we're getting unbiased news from the government in the White House when there's issues with the White House Press Association and banning legacy publications?
All right, last point.
Yep. And the last point is with the Democratic Party and with the forms of protest that I've been seeing with the pink jackets and the signs and standing outside of the Department of Education, I guess I'm just a little fatigued. You know, I've been protesting for so long. I've been part of the Black Lives Matter movement since I was 10 years old, and it just seems that black people are still getting killed. We're getting our words painted over for Black Lives Matter Plaza. You know, how many more times can we do these peaceful protests and not receive any actual justice before we feel like we don't have any more options?
Okay, real quick, the states' rights point, Obamacare was actually structured to do that by offering an incentive for each state to adopt it. So it really did do a states' rights piece. The delay was the southern states didn't want to adopt it, even though 90% of the health care that was added would be funded by the federal government. So that's part of what happened with that. They started calling it something else, like Kentucky, instead of calling it Obamacare, called it Kentucky Care, then they adopted it. On the last point with Black Lives Matter, and then I'm going to go to the next one here, Black Lives Matter had an impact. There were cops that got indicted after Black Lives Matter that did not get indicted beforehand. So I think it clearly had an impact. It had an impact on the 2020 election as well. There's always a pendulum swing back, but we've got to make sure we push it back.
We got a question up top. We got a question up top.
All right, real quick.
Good evening, Congressman. My name is Patrick Barnes, and we thank you for being here. I'm a graduate of PG County Schools. I'm a veterinarian and a minister. 2 questions. What is the long-term plan for the Democratic Party for historically black colleges and universities and protection of LGBT students?
HBCUs, so far the funding's been not touched, so we want to make sure we continue to protect that. And there's been some jumps in private funding too, especially Mackenzie Scott, the private philanthropist who started giving like $50 million chunks to Howard and others. What was the second question? LGBTQ. Critical issue. I think Trump just signed an executive order trying to attack them somehow. But I think it's important for us to continue to fight and hold the line on that to the extent we can. He's rolling back through executive order things that are done by the military, the VA, and others to try and limit them or take away health care access that they had been given under the Biden administration. I think we have to push to get that back. But the only way it's really going to come all the way back is when we get the White House again. Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, awesome. So thank you again, Congressman, for taking this time. I know it's gone over. I'm a little nervous, but I'm passionate. That's why I waited in this line. One of the things I wanted to bring up was we're recognizing a shift, and what's going to happen to the Democratic Party is what happened to the Republican Party recently. And we're looking for radical fighters in the Democratic Party. We need people that are going to take a stand for things and not just ride the middle. And if you can't, you're going to see a lot of your constituents and people fall off. And so recently looking at the news and stuff like that, I'm seeing some congressmen and politicians really speak up and take stands. But I want to bring back up a conversation that was hit on earlier today, and that's on funding in your campaign. And I know you said that you're okay with taking APAC money. I was disappointed by your answer. But I think one of the things that we need to see is just some politicians take a stand. So I'm asking you now, would you agree in your next campaign to be completely publicly funded? And
No.
if not?
No.
And if not?
I don't even think there's public funding for
If-
Congress or
okay,
congressional
if not,
races. Okay.
How do you ensure that your legislative priorities remain focused on the needs of your constituents rather than your donors?
Great question. So the bottom line for my donors is I have, I don't know, like 3,000 donors or something like that who, by and large, have given money in ways that, you know, $500, $1,000 increments, something along those lines. So, and most of them aren't asking me for anything. So,
Congressman, we're smart.
Yeah, I'm smart.
We're
That's
smart.
right. And before I was getting any money, if you take a look at my career, I was taking the same stands that I've been taking. I waited 40 years to get to this job. I worked in the public sector. I worked in the Department of Justice. I worked in the United States Senate. I worked in the House for John Conyers. I have a long career of standing for the same things I'm standing for now. So, and when I was state's attorney here in Prince George's County, it was the same thing. In fact, some of the stands I took were not consistent with raising. When I came out against the death penalty, you think that helped me raise money with, you know, a lot of the moderate donors? No.
So you're used to taking bold stands, which is great. And I think we see a lot of talk around the oligarchs and what they're
because
doing.
we got all these other people who stood in line just like you did too.
I know, but this is the same thing, and we see it as the same thing. That
Okay.
lobby money, super PAC money is the same thing as what Elon Musk is doing. So we see it.
No,
And
it's
so-
not what Elon Musk is doing. You know, I don't know that there's anybody on the planet who's doing what Elon Musk is doing right now. I just don't think it's not equivalent. It's just not. Yes.
Good evening. I am Tori Vest. I'm a constituent from District 4. I'm retired Navy, 7 years, retired due to service-related disability. And this point actually dovetails very well into my question. By continuing to insist that you are correct and that what we are trying to tell you, what we see, what we believe, what we perceive as your constituents is wrong, you are not being open to feedback from your constituents and your voters.
What is it I'm not listening to?
She just said that she saw these two things as big money, and you said they're not the same. You just completely ignored her. And I would like to
Elon
finish my
Musk
point, please.
is, well, okay.
You are worth approximately somewhere between $1 to $3 million. Your salary is $174 million. Per capita, thank you. Sorry, that was a big step. Per capita, District 4, the average salary is less than $41,000. That means that in your district, people are surviving on less than $4,000 a month. You operate in different circles than we do. You talk with different people than we do. If you don't, when we say that we are scared of surviving until 2026, that's what we mean. We don't have the salary to save and make it that far. My pension doesn't get me that far. When I
Right.
lose my health care, I will be blind by 2026.
Right.
And you will want me to show up and get arrested and be blind. And I will do that. But I want you to be there with me with your $174,000 to say, I was there every step of the way for 700 days for each and every one of my constituents to put every dollar that I could into education, back into the VA, back into retirement and Social Security. When we say that we're scared, it's because we make less than a quarter of what you do per capita. We can't make it to 2026 based on those numbers alone, and we need you to focus on March. We need you to focus on April.
You know, I appreciate that, but I mean, that's why I got in politics. I mean, you know, the reason we're pushing, for example, to protect Medicaid is not because I need it. It's because there are poor people And I gave you the numbers at the beginning of the night. Here in Prince George's County who need it. That's why I'm doing it. That's why I'm fighting that fight. And so, you know, I make $174,000. It's less than I made when I was in private practice, but I want to be, it's my turn. I wanted to be a public servant. And so that's why I'm doing the work. That's why I'm working hard to try and make a difference in the community. Now, the amount of money I'm getting, you know, I've been involved in public service since 1987, you know? So I appreciate your concerns, but I'm not fighting against that. I'm fighting for it. I really am. And the people that we work with to try and help here in Prince George's, I think most of them get it. When we do that, when I go visit, like for example at the churches I went to, you know, over last weekend in particular, but that's what we're doing. When my wife helps the shelter down in District Heights, that's what it is. We're going there tomorrow, I guess, that's for Medicaid funding. So this is what we're doing. So that's the reason I'm in.
Congressional salaries?
What is that?
Will you vote against raising congressional salaries?
No, but I mean, it never comes up, but no, because, you know, how does that change? Okay, here's what you're saying. The people, like take the Senate, for example. Most of the people are multimillionaires in the Senate, that they don't care about the salary. And so one of the things we're trying to do, and you know, I don't think there's been a raise in Congress for 20-something years, and it's below, say, like federal judges, for example, by $50,000. So if there are people out there who are middle income, who want to run for Congress, like AOC, and get elected, that's great. I don't think they should be trying to lower the salaries, because it'll actually discourage the number of people, middle income people, who will be able to run. I mean, the reason I was able to do it and get away with it in this point of my life is because all of my kids are grown and have gone through college. So, but anyway, I think next question here real quick.
These have to be the last question.
Okay.
Thank you. So I have three points very quickly. What wasn't in the Democratic platform was calling for an immediate ceasefire. Also, you mentioned that people in the Senate don't care about salary, but they care to be career politicians. Would you be willing to give your support to an independent or Green Party representative for the next election, since you don't have the ideas and the Democratic Party is already fractured beyond measure?
Would I be willing to do what?
Would you be willing to give your support to the next Green Party representative or independent?
No.
Okay. Then
No.
I will not be voting for you next. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yes. Oh, that's right, you gotta need the mic there. Just real quick on that last question, if we elect, well, in order to get the House back and have the majority, we need to have the Democrats in. We got the exception, Bernie Sanders, but, you know, trying to push the Green Party, as we've seen with, is Jill Stein Green Party? Okay, is she under 1% every time we wrote? Okay, so, you know, I respect the Green Party and what they're doing, but we need to win. You know, these vanity campaigns and things like that, people are starving right now. We've got to make sure we get the work done. And the only way we can fix these issues we've been talking about for the last 2 hours is to win these elections. That's the bottom line. Yes, ma'am.
You hear me?
There you go.
Okay, I am...
Stay close to it.
Okay. I am a Muslim. And for the first time in my life, I'm standing here in fear. Because I don't think my First Amendment right is protected. Okay? Are you going to protect me? Are you going to protect all those? It's not just about me. Maybe some of us are indispensable, like it seems. Like it seems like genocide is okay for whatever reasons. At least think about others, because they will come for us. We are dispensable. We don't matter. Those people don't matter. There are so many human rights abuses. They don't matter. Life is going on. But at least smell the coffee. Do you think 2026 is coming? Do you think they are not going to rig elections? You think you can stop that? You think courts can stop that? Who is going to implement their verdicts? Where is the force? Who is going to do that? Can't you see it? And sorry to say, Democratic Party sounds like Chamberlain in World War II, okay? We are there. If you can't see it, I can see it. I am just a regular, normal citizen. You have been telling me what you have done in your life. Haven't you read the history? Can't you see it? Tell me, what should I feel? What should I do? I don't know. Somebody will take a video or not. I don't know if somebody comes and pull up my car and asks me, where are your papers? Just because of the color of my skin, just because of my religion. Are you going to protect me, or are you going to have another town hall meeting and say that, oh, APAC money, I will take it. It's okay for them to kill so many people, and if I talk about it, I can be arrested. And I don't know if my citizenship matters anymore. What are you going to do about it? I'm your constituent. I voted for you. And do you know why you guys lost the election? Do you even know that? Have you guys done anything about it? Do you even know why Kamala Harris lost? Why there were not people out voting? Because you guys didn't even listen to them. You avoided certain concerns. And that fascist, he went to them. You guys didn't even did that. So you think that we should listen to you anymore? I'm so disappointed. I came with so much hope. I've been waiting here. And I don't know what will happen to me. Thank you. And then we even veto the
Okay. I'm not sure I got all of the question there, but the presidential election? Yeah, in Michigan. Okay. Well, let's take Michigan real quick. Alyssa Slotkin won in Michigan. And I know Harris lost in Michigan because she lost all of the battleground states. But, you know, I think it was a difference in the two campaigns, in part because she was better known in Michigan and I think did an outstanding job with the race. So I think what we're going to have to do is to close off. I can talk to people, but I guess we have to get outside to do it so they can start cleaning up. But look, I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. I know we lost most of our crowd over time, but you know, I appreciate the energy and the focus and the passion. And I also appreciate the fact that many of you want to keep working together on these kinds of issues to see if we can find a way, because we've got to win in 2026. And I know everybody's angry right now. I've got two of my kids that are they're getting laid off too right now, so I get it. But the only way we can fix that is to take the House back and hope that the courts keep doing the right thing on that front. So thanks everybody for coming out. Have a good evening. I'll stick around afterwards. Thanks again.